Here we are,
Here we are.
discovering and unlocking your brain superpowers, training your brain to work for you, not against you. Today, we're talking about the 7 minute rule. This is another brain training secret weapon. This one is mainly listed on the craftsman brain type, the improviser, the overseer, and the president. So it's on four different brain types. And if anyone's wondering what is a brain type, well, I've got an answer for that because we have this handy dandy brain type test that I developed, has 16 different brain types, and there's dozens of brain training exercises. And each brain type has half a dozen brain training exercises for them to do that's going to make sense on their brain wiring. What's a brain training exercise, you might ask? Well, it's a Jedi mind trick, basically, that it teaches your brain how to rewire itself for things like more willpower, less food cravings, and you name it. But it's all about changing the brain wiring because people are a certain way because their brain is wired a certain way. And the 16 different brain types helps people get to their superpowers, their Jedi mind tricks, their own custom superpowers and hacks to make fitness and health and nutrition easier and faster than ever before. So that's really and we're just talking about one of the dozens of brain training techniques. And this one is called the 7 minute rule. So this is a technique that's not in either of your brain types, but it still could be effective. The 7 minute rule is a technique that we can use when we're tempted to eat certain things that we know might not be healthy or in our best interest for the goals that we have, or if we're stressed, or in a social situation where we have patterns where we're kind of pressured in, whether it's external or our own pressure to maybe drink too much or eat the wrong kinds of foods, or just emotional eating,
Yeah.
maybe by yourself and there's something going on and there's emotional reasons for cravings or just eating. And it all boils down, especially the emotional eating, to medicating your brain out of that. And people really get caught into that trap of trying to change their state. And you and I have talked a lot about that in our podcasts about changing your state with techniques. But people that don't know that they can do it with techniques or how to do it, or even that they're in a crummy state, will get sucked into emotional eating.
Right.
And the reason they do that is to change their state through medication. Food is medicine.
Yeah.
Food changes chemicals and hormones and neurotransmitters in your brain, and it will change your mood and the state that you're in. The
Right.
problem is it's very temporary. And when you eat something, let's just take carbs, for example, fast carbs specifically will definitely change your state. So if you're stressed or in your bad mood, you can get out of that mood with the medication of fast carbs, meaning sugar, starch primarily. And temporarily, you'll feel different and you'll feel better. Sometimes people just want to feel different. They don't even care if they feel better. They just don't like the state they're in and they just
Yeah.
want to change it. And so that will help with that and help them escape that. And sometimes that food is linked emotionally. A certain food is linked emotionally to a good mood. So then they can trick their brain into feeling better temporarily that way too. But then it's always just temporary and it's so short and it lasts maybe as much as 30 minutes. And then everything starts to go back downhill and even lower than before. And the scary part is I've talked about the toddler being the subconscious. We call it the toddler. That's the subconscious part of the brain, which is in control of us.
Mhm.
And the toddler will reinforce that behavior because it'll say, hey, I know what can change our mood and our state. So let's have a Snickers bar. And then you give in, you eat the Snickers bar, and temporarily you feel good, but then you get the sugar low and you feel worse than before. And the toddler says, "Hey, remember what happened 30 minutes ago and how great we felt? Let's have another Snickers bar. Or how about some Oreos?" And then you get in this cycle of medicating yourself, trying to bump that mood back up, but it keeps crashing. And then you end up worse than you were before you ate it. And the toddler saying, "Do it again." And your prefrontal cortex, the parent brain, is saying, "No, no, please stop. This is a disaster. We know this is a disaster." But the toddler's louder and the willpower's down, especially towards the end of the day, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because the prefrontal cortex is wearing out. And it's this huge battle. So the 7-minute rule really helps a lot with that battle.
When I eat sugar, for example, it does feel good in the moment, but then
Mhm.
after, like, chemically, like, how what it's doing in the gut actually
Yeah.
changes your mood as well, but in a negative way. So you're kinda yo-yoing. Am I correct
Yeah,
on that?
absolutely.
Yeah,
It's a roller coaster.
right.
Yo-yo, it's just a nightmare, and that people don't realize this, and they get caught in that trap, and then they 30 minutes later they do it again, and then 30 minutes later they do it again.
Well, it can
And
create, like, irritability, right? Like, with
yeah,
sugar, like you were talking about a while ago, what hangry is. Like, do you know anything else about that? And, like, is there any more details that you could give people of why that happens?
yes, and I want to talk also about something you mentioned just a couple minutes ago, the
Yeah,
gut.
right,
So most of serotonin is produced in the gut, not in the brain.
right.
And serotonin is the happy chemical. Dopamine is the feel good in a moment, but it's pretty short lived. And serotonin is more longer lasting. Junk food, especially sugar and even starch, hits both of those. So you get the quick reward, the dopamine hit, and that's kind of the temporary high that you feel. And then but you also get the hit on the serotonin. So you get a dopamine jolt of dopamine, and then maybe a little bit from the brain of serotonin, but the gut's not pumping it out when you're eating that stuff. And then you go back down below the baseline of where you decided to eat the food. And now the sugar and starch is having a detrimental effect on your gut level, on the
Oh,
production of serotonin and the damage to the serotonin production. Then it's contributing to that downward motion. And then you're constantly trying to chase that baseline, trying to get back up above it until pretty soon you're not. And the 7-minute rule is designed to help you break that pattern and that cycle of chasing that baseline and trying to get back above it. Microbiome in the gut is what we're talking
mhm,
about here, is responsible for making that serotonin. If your microbiome is balanced and healthy, then it's going to make lots of it. It's going to be really good at it. But if it's imbalanced and unhealthy, it's going to be lousy at it. And so then, because you just can't make enough serotonin to keep your mood elevated, now you're chasing after dopamine, which doesn't last as long as serotonin. And so then you're doing other things and more addictive behavior. Anytime somebody tells me that they have a highly addictive personality, I suspect they might have a serotonin problem.
hmm. Interesting. So with
Or
exercise, like just to kind of go into that really quick, because I know we want to talk about like the 7 minute rule. And that's the topic today. But with exercise, right? We're big on exercise, obviously, both
yeah,
of the mind and the body. But with exercise, is there specific types of exercise that you feel like are better for the microbiome than others? Because there's so many different types of exercise that you can do.
I'll start with what not to do.
Okay.
The worst type of exercise for the gut microbiome is long duration steady state, like going for a marathon, because at that point, you're doing medium to high intensity, especially if you're competing in a marathon, and it's just way too long. The
Mm.
body is not designed to do that. All the marathoners out there are going to be offended right now. But let's talk when you're 70 years old about how you're feeling because you're a competitive marathoner. It's not just the joints that take the beating, it's your gut microbiome and it's actually your heart because you
Mm,
can get scarring in your heart from medium to high intensity long duration. And so it's kind of, think of it kind of like a crock pot, low temperature, long duration. Okay. You never do high temperature, long duration because it ruins all the nutrients in the food. You either do high temperature, short duration, or you do low temperature, long duration. And those are both great ways to cook food and not ruin everything that's beneficial in the food. Same with the body.
mm.
So you want to do high intensity, short duration, and that's really good for gut microbes. And if you're going to do long duration, make sure it's low intensity. So you're not stressing your system because anytime that you stress your system, you're releasing cortisol, and cortisol breaks you down, including your gut microbes. So you a short burst of cortisol is okay. And you will release that, some of it, when you're doing high intensity exercise for short duration. But when you're doing medium to high intensity exercise for long duration, now you're just pumping out way too much cortisol for way too long. And there's another reason that it breaks you down, including the gut microbes.
Yeah, I was like, while you're talking about this, I obviously, think about you doing tower running. When you were doing
Mhm.
tower running, would you call that short burst? Because how long did it usually take you to climb a tower?
Yeah, it was 10 minutes or less. And well, yeah, Willis Tower is longer than 10 minutes, but most of the tower runs are 10 minutes or less. If somebody can really, if they're capable of pushing themselves really hard, 20-ish minutes is the limit.
Do you think that long duration cardio is good in like smaller moderation for the heart, like maybe like once a week or twice a week, or do you think it's not even needed?
Not needed.
Wow.
I am of the opinion, and it's just my opinion of 30 years of research, that it's not necessary and it's not needed. Now,
Like a little jab.
having 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 said all that, I
Yeah.
sometimes recommend it.
Yeah.
And when I sit down and I talk with people, especially initially, if they're a new member at the xgym and they want to take the deep dive, we sit down and we talk. It's either about exercise or nutrition. The first 30 minutes or more is just questions. I'm just asking them questions. I'm not telling them anything because I need information on them because they're a very unique individual. There's 8 billion people on the planet and there's 8 billion different metabolisms and brains and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to sit down and talk with that person to biohack them, starting with a whole bunch of questions. And one of the first questions is, tell me what's worked for you in the past. And in this conversation, if we're talking about exercise, if they talk about long duration exercise, a lot of people like the long duration stuff for stress release and reprogramming. Kind of like when we're sleeping, our brain is moving around the files and putting things in the right filing cabinets and organizing. And some people find that'll happen while they're doing long duration exercise. So great, keep doing that for now. And I don't even say the for now part, but in my brain, I'm saying it because later down the road, you're probably not going to need that because with the right brain training and the right rewiring, you're going to find other strategies that could replace the long duration exercise.
Yeah, because I know that like a lot of studies came out within, well, they've been around for a while, but it's gotten popular, is the idea of HIIT cardio,
Hmm.
which is something that we do a variation of in the X gym. We don't do any jumping or things like that just because we're careful with joints and we're trying to make sure that we have more longevity. And that
Hmm.
actually is more effective in 15 to 20-minute periods. And to me, that's you really only need 2 to 3 times a week of that. Would you say that that's, like, a good ratio is, like, 2 to 3 times a week of HIIT cardio or even less than that?
Usually even less. But this is another way that people end up kind of steering away from the long duration stuff to the shorter duration stuff
Yeah.
because they find that hit cardio does the same thing for them in way less time.
Yeah, it burns fat because you're doing this to your heart. You're confusing your heart just like you're supposed to confuse your body. Which
Yeah.
is why, we do like 7 weeks of like the same routine, but then we change it up, for our
Hmm.
clients for one-on-one, is because you don't want the body to get used to what you're doing. So you got to change
Yeah.
it up. And that's
Right.
how you burn fat. So a lot of people don't know that. They're like, oh, I'm on the treadmill for an hour, I'm going to burn fat. And that's just not the best way to do it. So,
Right. And the other problem with long duration cardio, if it's beyond, we're talking beyond mental reasons, if it's physical reasons, your body is really good at adapting to that because it will just make it more efficient. And this is why you see these runners out there that do this really long duration stuff, even the medium to lower intensity. Their body has adapted and become so efficient at it that they have this little spare tire they can't get rid of. And they're like, what the heck? What's going on? Well, because you've been doing the same thing every day for so long, your body isn't getting the calorie benefit out of it than it would if I were to run that far or even walk that far. And so it's just learned to be efficient. That's what bodies do. But when you're doing interval training, high intensity interval training, it can't adapt to that. You kind of alluded to our classes at the X gym, and we change them up all the time.
yeah.
We'll change them up every month or two, or usually though, the trainer's just kind of making stuff up because it's funner that way. Yeah, I know. I
Way
do
more
too.
fun that way. What are you talking about? I love my
I
cardio
rarely
class.
go. Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
rarely go with what's on the board.
Oh,
Only if
yeah.
there's a really, really big class,
Yes.
we need more organization. But if it's a medium-ish class, I'll just wing it and just come up with stuff like you do. And it's
It's
funner
fun.
for everybody.
It's so fun. It's really a blast, and it's like the fact that you can just be creative in that
Hmm.
space, and like it's fun for everybody because no one gets tired of the same routine all the time. And but yeah, just
Hmm.
going back to like the 7-minute rule. This goes for food, obviously. So in that category, what is the 7-minute rule?
So whenever you need to use it, it could be to resist a craving, or emotional eating, or a social interaction, or patterns with your spouse, partner, friends, out to happy hour, whatever. First step is to just catch yourself. Just recognize, oh, this is a pattern. This is a state that I'm in, whether it's emotional or social. And then the first thing that you do within the rule is stop and think about your goals, your health and fitness goals. Say, okay, what are my health and fitness goals? Then ask yourself, why do I have these goals? Because it's enough just to say, oh, I want to get in better shape. That's pretty general and that rarely works. But then when you think, okay, specifically, what does that look like? And then you think, why do I even want to do that? Think about your why. So you're thinking about your goals and your why. Then, if you're alone, you can do this breathing technique, or if you're not, excuse yourself to a place where you are alone. Like if you're at a restaurant, you go to the bathroom and you do a breathing exercise. And this is belly breathing. You put your hand on your stomach, and then when you inhale, you feel the belly expanding, and then you hold it. And then while you're holding it, you think about relaxing thoughts. And then you breathe out naturally, just kind of letting the breath come out, visualizing and thinking about releasing tension. So you're exhaling tension and stress. So you inhale, and the timing on this is inhale to four. I call it the 7-second breath because you're inhaling to 4 seconds, belly expanding. Then you're holding for 3, and then just breathing out naturally, just letting it go. Just relax, let it go. And as you're exhaling, you're visualizing and thinking about releasing tension and stress. And do that for 4 minutes. So your friends might think if you go to the bathroom, they might start to worry, or if they're drinking, they won't notice. But regardless, you can just come back and joke about being constipated, and then, or,
Depending on who you're with, yes.
or, or, whatever. They probably won't notice because they're in their own conversation and all that kind of stuff. And that's the other thing is people we worry too much about what we think people are thinking about us. They're not thinking about us. They're thinking about themselves.
They
And
are.
so just like we all are too. And so
Yeah.
just stop worrying about that. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about that anymore. And then so 4 minutes of this breathing, and then you're done with that step. That's step number two. And then step number three is to go back to step number one. Think about your goals and your why. What are your goals? Why do you have those goals? Now you have changed your state, you have recentered with your goals and your why. And because you changed your state yourself instead of food changing your state or patterns with someone else, friends or whoever, now you're at a different place. Then when you go back to the table, you probably won't fall into that same pattern or emotional eating. But if you must still eat that food, then do it. And a lot of people hear me say that and they go, oh my gosh, no way, it's cheating, blah, blah, blah. Well, nobody's perfect, right? And you can't expect yourself to be perfect. And you've got to give yourself some leeway. And so then, but if you do, eat it slowly
Mm.
and do the conscious eating technique that we talked about in a previous podcast as you're eating it. So you're not wolfing it down because the toddler inside is going to want to wolf it down to get that brain state change as fast as possible. But you're also interrupting a pattern by changing your speed of eating and changing that experience and that pattern as well. So those are the steps. It's as easy as that. And this one, like all the brain training techniques that we have, are a skill and you get better at it with practice. So if you're using this technique and it doesn't work, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that you need to do it again some other time because every time you do, you get better at it until pretty soon it turns into your own personal Jedi mind trick, especially if you're the brain type of primary or secondary of craftsman, improviser, overseer, or president. Then you'll find it the most effective for those brain types. But everybody else, it works too. I don't have any of those brain types, and it works for me too. Just the six that I do have on mine are even more effective.
Yeah, so you could have it stack the 7-minute rule. So it's like every time, and you could say this out loud to yourself, like at the restaurant today, when the food is set down in front of me, I will go to the bathroom and do the 7-minute rule. It actually
Yeah,
can enforce that habit. So, because a lot of people will say, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. Just take it one step at a time and like say it out loud because that's going to be a lot more effective for you. And you're more likely to do it if you're saying it out loud. So that's
I
just
love
something
it.
I wanted to add in there because I think people get really in their heads about, oh, I have so much other things to do, or that's a really long thing. And it's like, it's really not that long. It's just that, you're kind of working it up in your head, and just make it simple.
Hmm.
Create it to be simple for yourself so that you don't get overwhelmed with these brain training hacks because we have so many for different brain training, like, or brain types is what I should say. But you can do it. It's really not
Hmm.
that hard. It just takes
Hmm.
the commitment and the effort to put it in, and you're going to be so much happier in the long run. So,
It's true. You bring up a good point because anything you can do to make it easier to do this, like habit stacking or the trigger technique, is huge
right.
because, especially in the beginning, because the brain doesn't want to change. The toddler's in charge. Toddlers like things the way they are. They like things to be familiar and stay that way. And it takes work and energy to change neural pathways in the brain, create new ones and get rid of old ones. And the body and the brain are designed to be very efficient and do as little work as possible. And so the toddler is going to try to sabotage you when you're doing some of these brain training techniques because it knows there's change that's going to happen. The brain training techniques are designed to make that change quicker and easier than a lot of other books and techniques out there. And just like the xgym, it's a time hack too.
Mm.
So it's also really effective. And the toddler doesn't like that. and the body and the brain, the efficiency doesn't like that. And so that's something to be really aware of. Even just forgetting, the toddler can, as simple as making you forget to do it. So you're in that situation and you'll remember later, after. Oh, why didn't I think of the brain training? You forgot. You just didn't think of it. Why didn't I think? Why did I space? It was your toddler. You were about to think of it. The toddler can see the thoughts coming and then get in the way and say, nope, that means change. Let's make you forget it or not do it. Let me give you distraction. So when that happens, and I say when because it will, it always does, not if, but when this will happen, then you say, oh, friggin' toddler. And so then you can have strategies and think about that next time. And every time this happens, you get better, and then you're able to get around the toddler and do that change, the thing that causes change. And it's uncomfortable too. I mean, these brain training techniques are designed to be way easier than what other people have tried in the past. But any change is uncomfortable. Any change. Doesn't matter how easy the technique is, it's uncomfortable.
Oh,
And we don't like to be out of our comfort zone. But change never happens within our comfort zone.
oh.
We'll stay the same if we always stay within our comfort zone. But if we're able to stretch our envelopes and step outside it every once in a while, that's where change takes place, only outside the comfort zone.
Yes, very good information, super important. It's really great because habits, I mean, this is all we're talking about. Obviously, it's brain training, but they are habits that you want to create for yourself and get
Mhm.
into. And it's so important to realize that you do have to have grace with yourself because change does take time, change does take effort, but it's so worth it because if you continue to do the same things you're doing now, you won't change the way you want to. It's like if you want to be a different person or you want to like have different results, you have to change the things that you're doing in order to get those
Mhm.
results.
Yep. Th- These are custom hacks to find your own brain superpowers at braintype.me to see what your brain type is and your custom brain training techniques based on your unique brain wiring. It's still work, but it's less work than doing it other ways. You know, people read self-help books till the cows come home, and they go to motivational seminars and, try the Tony Robbins steps, and all that is good. It's great. But why do they fall back to their normal patterns? Because they go back to their comfort zone where change
Mhm.
doesn't take place. Change never happens. It's one thing to be motivated temporarily, but it's another thing to change your brain wiring. That's the permanent way. And that's what this is all designed to do, is to rewire your brain so you're not just getting these temporary highs from motivational seminars and courses. It's using techniques to literally change the wiring so you think differently and then act differently. Fit, healthy, lean, strong people think and act differently than out of shape people who are less healthy. So, how do you get different thoughts? You change your brain wiring. And that's what these techniques are all about.
Yeah, awesome.
Right on. Good stuff. Virtual. Boom.
Rachel, goes today.